The winter wind howled across the frozen plains of Eastern Europe, carrying with it the smell of oil, smoke, and burning steel. In the distance, the silhouette of a German Tiger tank stood like a metal beast, thick armor gleaming under pale sunlight, its long 88-meter gun pointed toward the horizon with quiet arrogance. For years, the Tiger had ruled the battlefield, feared by Allied crews, respected even by its enemies. Wherever it rolled, destruction followed. But on this day, something new waited in the white haze of snow and gunpowder. Something heavier. Something faster. Something born from desperation and forged in revenge. When the Soviet tank crews first saw it rumbling beside them, they didn't yet know they were witnessing a machine that would change the balance of armored warfare forever. A tank designed not just to fight the Tiger, but to make it irrelevant. This is the story of the steel giant that shattered German supremacy, the story of the IS-2. By 1941, Nazi Germany's armored divisions had smashed deep into Soviet territory during Operation Barbarossa. The speed and coordination of German panzer units stunned the Red Army. Soviet tanks burned in fields by the thousands. Entire armies collapsed under the weight of blitzkrieg tactics. But amid the chaos, one Soviet design had surprised the Germans, the T-34. With its sloped armor and wide tracks, it was superior to most early German tanks. It shocked the Wehrmacht. Yet as the war dragged into 1942 and 1943, Germany answered back with something terrifying: the Tiger I. The Tiger wasn't just a tank. It was a psychological weapon. Its 88 BEM KW-36 gun could destroy Soviet armor from extreme distances. Its thick frontal armor could shrug off most Soviet shells. Crews reported rounds bouncing off harmlessly. Stories spread among Red Army soldiers of Tigers surviving dozens of hits. Fear returned to the battlefield. At Soviet High Command headquarters in Moscow, reports from the front painted a brutal picture. Tigers were halting offensives. Entire tank brigades were being wiped out before getting within effective firing range. Something had to change. The Soviet Union needed a breakthrough. Not an incremental upgrade, but a hammer. And that hammer would be forged in the factories of Chelyabinsk, a city that would earn the nickname Tikograd. Designers, engineers, and workers labored day and night. Production halls thundered with the sound of machinery. Steel plates were cut and welded in freezing temperatures. Women and teenagers replaced men who had gone to the front. The Soviet Union was fighting not only a military war, but an industrial one. Out of this furnace of desperation came a new concept, a heavy breakthrough tank that combined thick armor with overwhelming firepower. The earlier KV series had shown promise, but mechanical issues and insufficient firepower limited its effectiveness against Tigers. The answer would be a new design under the leadership of Soviet engineer Joseph Kotin. They called it Iosif Stalin. The first version carried a 102-Vinrid gun, a weapon more commonly seen mounted on artillery pieces. Mounting such a massive cannon on a tank was audacious. The recoil alone could tear apart poorly designed structures. But Soviet engineers embraced brutality over elegance. They did not need finesse. They needed impact. When the prototype fired its first live round, the blast echoed like thunder. The shell weighed over 25 kilograms. At impact, it didn't just penetrate armor. It shattered it. Even if it failed to pierce fully, the concussive force could cripple internal components or kill crew members through spalling. This was not a sniper's rifle like the Tiger's 88 PMM. It was a sledgehammer, and it was coming. In early 1944, as the Red Army began pushing westward after the victory at Battle of Kursk, the new heavy tank entered production. It was officially designated IS-2. Its thick, sloped frontal armor could resist many German anti-tank weapons. Later models improved the frontal glacis plate into a single-piece design, eliminating weak seams. The turret was massive and rounded, giving it a menacing profile. But the true terror was its D-25 T-122 Undumby gun. When Soviet tank crews first trained with the IS-2, they noticed something immediately. This was not a tank built for rapid firing. Its ammunition came in two parts, shell and propellant, which slowed reload time. A skilled crew might manage 2 to 3 rounds per minute. In comparison, the Tiger could fire faster. But speed did not matter if one shot was enough. On the battlefield, an IS-2 shell striking a Tiger often resulted in catastrophic damage. Armor plates cracked. Turrets jammed. Internal explosions ripped through compartments. German crews who once felt invincible now faced a predator of their own. The first major clashes between IS-2 tanks and German heavy armor shocked both sides. In engagements across Poland and eastern Prussia, reports emerged of IS-2 as destroying Tigers, and even the newer Tiger II, also known as the King Tiger. The myth of German armored invincibility began to crumble. German tank commanders quickly realized they could no longer rely solely on frontal superiority. Tactics shifted. Ambushes became more common. Combined arms coordination intensified. But the balance had changed. For the first time since the Tiger's introduction, Soviet crews possessed a machine that could confidently engage and win head-on confrontations. Yet the IS-2 was not perfect. Its heavyweight stressed components. Reload times required careful positioning and support from other tanks. It was designed primarily as a breakthrough vehicle, smashing fortified positions, destroying bunkers, and supporting infantry assaults in urban warfare. And that is exactly where it would prove decisive. As Soviet forces approached Berlin in 1945, IS-2 tanks rolled through ruined streets, blasting apart buildings housing German defenders. A single 122 WWII explosive round could collapse entire facades. The psychological effect was devastating. German soldiers who once relied on fortified strongpoints found themselves exposed. Walls were no longer protection. Rubble became graves. The IS-2 was no longer merely countering Tigers. It was reshaping the battlefield environment itself. Inside the cramped steel interior of an IS-2, crews endured deafening noise and suffocating heat. Every shot filled the turret with smoke and shock waves. Communication required shouting. The loaders struggled with heavy ammunition in confined space. But morale was high. For years, Soviet tankers had fought at disadvantage against superior German armor. Now they felt equality, even dominance. When IS-2 columns advanced, infantry cheered. Civilians watched with awe. The silhouette of the tank became a symbol of Soviet industrial and military power. By war's end, thousands of IS-2s had been produced. While the T-34 remained the backbone of Soviet armored forces, the IS-2 carried symbolic weight. It was the fist that punched holes in German defensive lines. The Tiger had once represented German technological superiority. But war is not static. Innovation breeds counter-innovation. The IS-2 did not merely match the Tiger. It neutralized its advantage. In armored warfare, supremacy is temporary, steel evolves. And as the smoke cleared over Europe in May 1945, wrecked Tigers and shattered King Tigers lay abandoned beside burned-out Soviet machines. The battlefield had become a graveyard of titans. But history would remember one truth. The era of the Tiger ended not with a whisper, but with the thunder of a 122 WWII shell. The spring thaw of 1944 turned the Eastern Front into a sea of mud, smoke, and uncertainty. German defensive lines, once thought unbreakable, were bending under relentless Soviet pressure. Yet even as the Red Army advanced, the battlefield remained haunted by one symbol of German armored might, the Tiger I. For years, its 8800 gun had dominated open terrain, striking Soviet armor before it could even respond. Tank crews whispered about its accuracy. Commanders adjusted entire strategies around its presence. But now, a new shadow loomed in the fog, the IS-2. When these two machines met face to face, it was no longer merely a tactical engagement. It was an industrial duel. A philosophical clash between German precision engineering and Soviet brute force practicality. The Tiger relied on meticulous optics, experienced crews, and superior long-range engagement. The IS-2 relied on impact, on closing distance, on coordinated assault, on delivering a devastating blow capable of ending the fight in a single thunderous discharge. In one engagement near Sandomierz, Poland, German heavy tank battalions equipped with Tigers and the newer Tiger II attempted to halt Soviet armored spearheads. Fields that had once grown wheat became arenas of steel. Early morning mist clung low to the earth as silhouettes emerged, thick turrets, long barrels, engines roaring like distant storms. A Tiger commander scanning the horizon through his sight might first notice movement, a dark shape cresting a ridge. He would calculate range, adjust elevation, and fire with disciplined confidence. The 80 BMR shell would scream across open ground, striking the glacis of an advancing IS-2. Sparks would erupt. Steel would groan. Sometimes the Soviet tank would burn, but sometimes it would not stop. The sloped frontal armor of late Model IS-2S, redesigned in 1944, proved more resilient than earlier German crews expected. At medium distances, the Tiger's shells could struggle to achieve clean penetration. And when the IS-2 fired back, the battlefield changed. The 122 mm D-25T cannon did not whisper. It detonated the air itself. Observers described its muzzle blast as a physical force, flattening grass and kicking up dust in violent waves. When its piercing shell struck a Tiger, the result was catastrophic. Even non-penetrating hits could shear off armor plates or cause deadly internal fragmentation. Turrets jammed. Crew compartments turned into furnaces of flying metal shards. Where the Tiger aimed for surgical kills, the IS-2 delivered blunt trauma. German crews quickly adapted, attempting to exploit their faster reload times. A Tiger might fire 3 times before an IS-2 reloaded once. But this advantage required ideal conditions, stable ground, clear visibility, precise communication. The Eastern Front rarely offered such luxury. Mud-swallowed tracks. Smoke-blinded optics. Artillery thundered without pause, and increasingly, Tigers were forced into defensive roles. The tide of war had shifted after Battle of Kursk, where German offensive capability suffered irreparable losses. By 1944, Soviet industry was outproducing Germany at staggering rates. IS-2 tanks rolled from factories in numbers that German logistics could not match. The psychological equation began to invert. Where once Soviet crews feared the silhouette of a Tiger, now German tankers hesitated at reports of heavy Soviet armor ahead. The myth of invulnerability, carefully cultivated since 1942, cracked under the weight of new realities. In urban combat, the contrast became even sharper. The Tiger's long-range advantage diminished among shattered buildings and narrow streets. The IS-2, with its enormous high explosive shells, excelled. A single round could collapse fortified positions, rip through stone walls, or obliterate anti-tank gun nests hidden inside apartment blocks. In the cities of Eastern Europe, the IS-2 became a battering ram. By late 1944, German armored doctrine faced a grim truth. Superiority in tank design no longer guaranteed battlefield dominance. Fuel shortages crippled mobility. Allied bombing devastated production lines. Replacement crews lacked the experience of earlier veterans. Meanwhile, Soviet crews, hardened by years of brutal conflict, advanced with growing confidence. The Tiger was still dangerous, deadly in the hands of skilled commanders. But it was no longer supreme. The battlefield belonged to momentum, and momentum favored the Red Army. By early 1945, the war in Europe was reaching its final act. Soviet forces surged toward the heart of the Third Reich. Rivers were crossed under fire. Bridges were built overnight. Columns of armor stretched for miles across frozen roads. Among them, heavy regiments of IS-2 tanks prepared for the ultimate confrontation, Berlin. The once feared Tiger now fought in retreat. Scarcity defined its existence. Fuel was rationed. Ammunition supplies dwindled. The ambitious engineering that had made the Tiger formidable now became a liability. Complex transmissions failed under stress, spare parts were scarce, and mechanical breakdowns left many tanks abandoned before battle even began. Meanwhile, the IS-2 was built with wartime pragmatism. It was not mechanically perfect, but it was serviceable. It was designed to endure harsh conditions and be repaired quickly. In the chaos of collapsing German defenses, reliability mattered more than refinement. As Soviet troops entered the outskirts of Berlin during the Battle of Berlin, IS-2 tanks led assault groups block by block. German defenders, including remnants of heavy tank units, positioned Tigers and King Tigers in ambush behind rubble barricades. The city became a labyrinth of death. A Tiger concealed behind a collapsed railway bridge might wait until an IS-2 exposed its flank. One precise 88 Demer round could still destroy the Soviet giant. And many IS-2s did burn in Berlin's streets. But the difference was scale. For every Tiger guarding an intersection, multiple Soviet tanks advanced with infantry support, artillery coordination, and overwhelming numbers. IS-2 crews learned to angle armor, to fire into suspected ambush points before turning corners, to rely on supporting T-34 units to cover reload gaps. The heavy 122 WWII shells became instruments of demolition. Entire buildings suspected of harboring German anti-tank teams were reduced to rubble. Defensive positions that might have stalled earlier offensives were simply erased. The Tiger had been designed for decisive armored duels in open terrain. Berlin was something else entirely. A grinding, close-range siege where brute force and logistics determined survival. And here, the IS-2's philosophy prevailed. By April 1945, German armored resistance had fractured. Tigers were destroyed, abandoned, or immobilized due to lack of fuel. Some were blown up by their own crews to prevent capture. The once dominant predator of the Eastern Front lay broken amid the ruins of the capital it was meant to defend. When Soviet flags were raised over the Reichstag, IS-2 tanks stood among the smoking wreckage, scarred, battered, but victorious. The Tiger was not erased from history because it was weak. It was erased because warfare evolved faster than it could adapt. Superior armor and precision were not enough against an enemy capable of matching firepower, while surpassing production and strategic depth. The IS-2 did not win by elegance. It won by delivering overwhelming impact at the right moment in history. After the war, surviving IS-2 tanks continued service for years, influencing post-war heavy tank development. The Tiger, meanwhile, became legend, studied, admired, but ultimately confined to museums and memory. In the silent fields of Eastern Europe, rusting hulls remind historians of a simple truth. No weapon remains supreme forever. The Tiger once defined armored dominance, but when the thunder of 122 WWII shells echoed across the continent, the age of the beast ended, and in its place stood a new symbol of power, forged in desperation, hardened by fire, and remembered as the Soviet tank that made German Tigers obsolete. Long before the final shots were fired in Berlin, the outcome of the duel between the Tiger I and the IS-2 was being decided far from the battlefield, inside factories roaring day and night. War in the 20th century was not simply a contest of tactics. It was a contest of industry. Steel output, rail capacity, oil reserves, skilled labor. The Tiger represented Germany's philosophy of quality over quantity, a masterpiece of engineering, yes, but also a machine that demanded enormous time, precision manufacturing, and scarce resources. Each Tiger required complex machining, interlocking armor plates, advanced optics, and finely tuned transmissions. It was a predator, but an expensive one. The IS-2, by contrast, was born of urgency. Soviet factories had already relocated eastward after Operation Barbarossa, beyond the reach of German bombers. Entire industrial complexes were dismantled and rebuilt in the Ural Mountains. Workers slept beside assembly lines. Production quotas were relentless. Efficiency became survival. Where Germany built hundreds of Tigers, the Soviet Union built thousands of heavy tanks alongside tens of thousands of medium tanks. The IS-2 was never meant to replace the T-34. It was meant to punch holes so the T-34s could flood through. And that strategy worked. By 1944, German commanders increasingly faced layered Soviet assaults. First came artillery barrages, then infantry waves, then heavy tanks like the IS-2 smashing fortified positions. Finally, mobile T-34 formations exploited breakthroughs at speed. Against this system, even the formidable Tiger II struggled to stem the tide. But beyond numbers, morale was shifting. Earlier in the war, the mere rumor of Tigers in an area could stall Soviet advances. Tank crews feared encountering the long 88W gun across open ground. Yet by late 1944, Soviet training manuals included tactical instructions, specifically designed to counter heavy German armor. Crews were taught to aim for turret rings, to exploit flanks, to coordinate ambushes, and most importantly, To close distance where their 122 mm gun would be devastating. Confidence replaced fear. German tank crews, meanwhile, felt increasing isolation. Fuel shortages meant fewer training hours. Replacement crews had limited experience. Maintenance teams lacked spare parts. What once felt like elite armored units now operated under constant strain. The Tiger still possessed lethal firepower, but its aura of invincibility had eroded. Reports from the Eastern Front describe situations where a single IS-2 shell struck a Tiger's frontal armor and cracked it open like brittle stone. In some cases, even when penetration failed, the shockwave shattered internal components or injured crew through armor spalling. The sheer mass of the Soviet projectile turned physics into a weapon. The duel was no longer about technical superiority alone. It was about survivability in a collapsing war machine. By winter 1945, German armored divisions were fighting defensively across shrinking territory. The Tiger was no longer the hunter, it was hunted. When the guns finally fell silent in May 1945, Europe lay in ruins. Burned-out tanks littered forests, villages, and shattered cities. Among them were the hulking remains of Tigers, some destroyed in combat, others sabotaged by their own crews to prevent capture. Standing among the wreckage were IS-2 tanks, scarred but operational, engines still rumbling as Soviet troops secured victory. But the question lingers in history. Did the IS-2 truly make the Tiger obsolete? Obsolete does not mean weak. The Tiger was never weak. It was deadly, feared, and technologically advanced for its time. But obsolescence in warfare is defined by context. A weapon becomes obsolete when it no longer guarantees strategic advantage. And by 1944-45, the Tiger no longer did. Its heavy armor could be penetrated. Its long-range advantage could be neutralized. Its production numbers could not keep pace. Its mechanical complexity became a burden in retreat. The IS-2 represented something different. It embodied adaptation. It answered the Tiger's strengths not by copying them, but by overwhelming them. A larger gun, sloped armor, simpler production, coordinated doctrine. After the war, heavy tank development continued. The Soviet Union refined the IS series into newer designs, influencing Cold War armored doctrine. Lessons learned from the IS-2 shaped future vehicles, emphasizing firepower combined with improved mobility. Germany, divided and defeated, saw the Tiger become a relic of history, studied in military academies, displayed in museums, admired by historians and enthusiasts alike. Today, surviving examples of both tanks remain as silent witnesses in museums across the world. Visitors stand beneath their towering hulls, imagining the thunder of engines, the concussion of cannon fire, the terror and courage of the men inside. The Tiger symbolizes engineering excellence pushed to its peak. The IS-2 symbolizes industrial resilience and overwhelming response. In the end, the battlefield did not crown the most elegant design. It crowned the design best suited to the realities of total war. The Tiger roared first. The IS-2 roared louder. And when history closed the chapter on armored warfare in World War II, it remembered the moment when German dominance met its equal and was surpassed. As the smoke cleared over Europe in 1945, the battlefield fell silent. Burned steel cooled beneath gray skies. The once feared Tiger I lay shattered in the rubble of cities it once dominated. But standing in the dust, scarred, dented, unstoppable, was the Soviet giant, the IS-2. This was not just the fall of a tank. It was the fall of an era. The Tiger symbolized German precision, power, and fear. The IS-2 symbolized endurance, adaptation, and overwhelming force. History did not remember who fired first. History remembered who endured. And when the thunder of 122mm shells echoed through Berlin, the myth of invincibility died in steel and fire. War does not reward perfection. It rewards survival. And in the end, the Tiger roared. But the IS-2 roared last. If you enjoyed this cinematic WWII story, here's something for you. Do you think the Tiger was still superior in open combat? Or did the IS-2 truly end German armored dominance? Comment your opinion below. I read every single one. If you love World War II documentaries and epic tank battles, Like this video to support the channel. Comment your thoughts. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next story might be even more explosive.